A very good evening, ladies and gentlemen, anybody that may be following us on YouTube. I'm Councillor Ian Edwards, and I am chairman of this subcommittee, which has been specially set up to consider all high-speed 2 applications relating to this borough. Let's go through a normal bit of practice. Colleagues, can I just ask your mobile phones to be turned off? No members of the public are present, but fire alarms, we will be evacuating. There's no tests expected. Let me just talk a little bit about members of the committee. It's a standard planning committee in terms of membership. However, its operation is slightly different from normal. Our members voting this evening, on my far right-hand side, Councillor Stead, Councillor Yarrow, Councillor Chan, Councillor Lavery. On my far left-hand side, Councillors Oswald, Councillor Duncan. Assisted by officer team. Ian Thine is our sustainability officer. He's the expert on high-speed 2 and will be presenting the application this evening. Raja Lagai is our borough solicitor. James Rogers is our head of planning and enforcement. Neil Fraser is democratic services, keeping minutes. And Rosen Hogan is our planning lawyer. That's the team this evening. It is, as I say, it is like a normal planning committee. However, it is subject to certain particular considerations that Ian Thine will very briefly outline in his presentation, in that the committee can only consider a very limited range of issues, and it is unlike an ordinary planning committee. So, with regards to feedback, anybody who may be following us online, if you wish to give us feedback, you can do so from a pull-down menu on the website, and I welcome you to do that. And we will very quickly move into the agenda, which is apologies for absence. Thank you.
Yes, apologies received from Councillor Chandler, with Councillor Chapman, his substitute.
Thank you very much. You're most welcome. Declarations of interest matters coming for. Anybody have any interest with regard to high-speed 2? No, thank you. No matters notified in advance, and the one item is going to be considered in public. So let's go straight into that item, which is high-speed 2 application off Breakspear Road. And Newpont.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, everyone. My name is Ian Thine. I'll be presenting this presentation tonight. So this is the first of a likely number of applications under Schedule 17 of the High Speed Rail Act 2017, and it relates to earthworks to create 4 number ponds, associated earthworks and high vernacular on farmland north of the Shearing Plough Research Facility, north of the Chiltern Line, west of Breakspear Road. And as you say, Chairman, the scope to be able to consider matters related to this application are limited by the High Speed Rail Act, and I'll briefly outline what they are. So all that we can consider tonight are conditions or refusal in relation to the design or external appearance of the works, and whether or not they can be reasonably modified to preserve the local environment or local amenity, to preserve or reduce prejudicial effects on road safety or on the free flow of traffic in the local area, or to preserve a site of archaeological or historic interest or nature conservation value. So a very limited scope in which to consider the material planning considerations tonight. The application, as I say, is off Breakspear Road. So if I can provide a map on the screen. So it's north of the existing pharmaceutical research facilities, as it's known. 4 ponds to be constructed. There's 2 shown on that plan, but you'll have in front of you a number of plans for HS2 planning subcommittee. And if you can turn to the second of those, these are the plans submitted by HS2 Limited as part of the application, and that shows the four ponds. 2 ponds at 300 metres squared and 2 at 150 metres squared. These ponds form part of the HS2 approval, and I'll turn to the screen. So this is the area that we're talking about here, just north of the pharmaceutical facility. This was approved. This was the planning context. This is what was approved as part of Parliament. However, the ponds have been increased to 4 now for environmental reasons. and that still fits within the requirements of the Act because they do not introduce any more significant local effects. So the ponds can be increased from 2 to 4 and still remain within the context of the Act. So we are commenting tonight, or considering, solely the earthworks to create these ponds. There was a statutory consultation process involved, so we've consulted Natural England on these, as these are newt ponds. Great crested newts are European protected species, and accordingly we had to consult Natural England. So Natural England was the only statutory consultee, given the restricted nature of the application. There's no statutory requirement to consult the public, but the public were able to comment via online, and there was one comment received from the Harefield and Tenants Residents Association. And if I may just go into the brief background of or just go through the report as it is. Generally speaking, it's been an uncontentious application. Natural England raised no objections and sought no modifications to the scheme. Moving forward there, relating to traffic and transport, there were concerns about the access road off Breakspear Road to the site for construction vehicles, and traffic officer has responded and has recommended a condition. Now I'll just park that for now, if I may, pardon the pun, but because that's subject to an addendum which officers have subsequently recommended following further legal advice. So in the context of the submission in front of us, no major issues have been raised by internal officers or statutory consultees. So the only concern that followed was relating to traffic. The initial agenda included a recommendation for a condition on there. A subsequent addendum has been to change that from a condition to an informative, for reasons that I'll just briefly go into, if I may Chair. So following the drafting of the original report, officers sought further legal advice, received further representations from HS2 Limited about the validity of the implication of that condition, and it was found to be perhaps not entirely in keeping with what the Act requires. So the Act requires only to consider the design and whether or not the design itself has an issue regarding traffic, not in the normal context where you would consider design and access as part of the red line boundaries of planning application. So in this instance, that physical works themselves do not pose an issue for traffic and transport. Notwithstanding that, the council obviously has concerns because traffic has to get off Breakspear Road to the site, and if I just may, the access, as you know, just off Breakspear Road, north of the Chiltern Line overbridge, a fairly precarious junction at best, so a heightened amount of vehicles using that access, which if we see here under a low bridge, you can just about see the access by the white sign in the distance. So this is a low bridge where tall vehicles often move to the centre of the road to get good clearance. There'll be an increased amount of HGV vehicles going into that site, and then obviously turning right onto Breakspear Road to come southbound. Obviously a concern in terms of traffic. However, as stated, the traffic concerns do not relate to the physical design of the earthworks. However, traffic is covered elsewhere by the HS2 Act, and it will be covered by the Code of Construction Practice. So if I may read a little short passage. The Code of Construction Practice requires, prior to the commencement of the works, so that's the works of HS2 in general, the nominated undertaker will require that the local traffic management plans will be produced in consultation with the highway and traffic authorities, the emergency services and other relevant key stakeholders. So essentially, prior to these works commencing, they still have to come to us to negotiate and consider the traffic associated with the scheme. So there is a separate route for the council to secure the safe management of traffic into and out of this site. It cannot form part of the submission tonight, but it will form part of a further amount of work with the local authority. So the recommendation from the officers is for approval, subject to two different informatives which are set out on the agenda. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Ian. Before we ask for comments, just to remind colleagues, I had forgotten until I was reminded that at our council AGM there were changes to the standing orders which set up the High Speed 2 subcommittee. But they also introduced additional delegated powers with regards to the traffic matters. So any traffic matter arising from this under those regulations will be dealt with under delegated powers. They will not come back to this committee. Okay? Just making that point. You wish to come in, Councillor Duncan?
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you to the officer for a very clear presentation. I do find that this poses difficulties for us as councillors in considering these matters. You have explained very clearly, and I do understand that, but the logical, consequence of this is that this proposes substantial earthwork movement, which has to be carried out by heavy goods vehicles. So, as I think we can all appreciate, that is our main concern. And yet we're not allowed to make any comment or condition or constraint or do anything about that, because this is a matter to be considered later. Well, logically put, we as councillors would then have to say, are these the smallest ponds necessary with the minimum amount of earthworks in order to reduce the amount of heavy goods vehicles that this necessary work will generate? That is one possibility, one option. And I'd like to seek some kind of reassurance about what we may find innocuous and indeed welcome if it's re-establishing protected species, and we want to do that, and we want to do that as well as possible. But if in doing that it's going to generate more heavy goods vehicles, which is going to have an impact on everybody, on the road system and everybody trying to get to work and school, pollution levels, etc. like that, I would like to know how that kind of issue is taken care of. Can we forward those concerns so that they're fed into that? Thank you.
Please, Ian.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor. I mean, in the first instance, in terms of the actual earthworks, so the proposal is for, in technical terms, a neutral cut and fill. So anything that they dig out will be used in the high vernacular in the bunds around the earthwork. So there will be minimal, if no, movement of material off-site. Notwithstanding that, they still have to get HGVs in to cart the muck around. They also have to get construction equipment in, and they also have to get staff in and out of the site. So notwithstanding the neutral cut and fill in technical term, there will be amounts of traffic involved. We are hamstrung by what the Act allows us to comment on at this stage, as Raj explained earlier, and I'm sure we'll add some legal comments in a second. But that's not to say that the traffic will be ignored in its entirety. They cannot commence these works until that traffic on this road is sorted out. And in general terms, speaking to the highways officers before we came in here, the simplest form of management on this site is simply for a banksman or a spotter to sit there and wait for the vehicles to come out and wait for the traffic to be in a safe place. And that's probably what would be expected given the amount of vehicles associated with this. Again, we're not helped by the fact that because we're not considering traffic in terms of the submission, HS2 Limited didn't provide any information on traffic. So we are, again, slightly hamstrung by what we can and can't comment on. However, it is absolutely pertinent to say that this site will not be, these works will not commence and the site will not be operated until we are satisfied that the traffic management in place is suitable, and we'll deal with that through the local traffic management plan at a later date.
Thank you. Councillor Oswald?
Thank you very much, Chairman. Yeah, I think following on from that, could we ask for a vehicle wheel wash? Because I think that might be quite vital there, because if they're going to be in and out of there, it will be 8-wheelers, there's no doubt about that. Probably 24 tonnes, and they're just going to be dragging mud out onto Breakspear Road South, and that is quite a busy road through the day. Just a couple of other things. On page 4, it mentions the River Pin. Well, that area some years ago was subject to quite a bit of flooding, and it does mention flooding in this report, and I can't remember where it was. I think it's further on in the report. So there's a question on that, whether that's going to affect the River Pin or not. And also, it says on the 3rd paragraph down about ancient woodland. Sorry, 2nd paragraph, ancient woodland. What's going to be the effect on that? Thank you, Jim.
Thank you. I'll come back to you again, Ian.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor. I'll start with the ancient woodland one first. There is no impact on ancient woodland in this particular instance. It's a generic comment provided. There's no trees to be lost. This is existing agricultural land associated with the research facility. So there is no... the only change in land use as we know it in planning terms would be from agricultural open fields to ponds. So there's no ancient woodland impacted. In terms of flooding, again, it goes back to one of the issues that we can comment on. The ponds will be constructed on land in flood zone 1, and the Flood and Water Management Officer has not raised substantial concerns with flooding. We are, again, somewhat hamstrung. We can't ask for a flood risk assessment, for example, as we would in a normal planning application, perhaps of this size. But the Flood and Water Management Officer has not raised substantial concerns that would require us to seek a change to the design and appearance of the earthworks. And in terms of mud on the roads, I think that's 3 points. In terms of the mud on the roads, as part of the approval for High Speed 2 Limited, is they have to operate and construct the scheme in accordance with environmental minimum requirements. Part of that is a code of construction practice, of which sits criteria for mud cleaning on the roads. So the intention being that it's not raised on every single application. They have to put together a plan for every single application. It's done over a route-wide process and has been approved by Parliament. So again, if they are in breach of that and there is mud on the roads, then the local authority can take enforcement action down that road.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Raj, you wish to come in?
I just wanted to come back, Councillor Duncan, on some of the concerns which you raised. I mean, I acknowledge that it does stick a little bit in the throat that the condition which was in the report is now being sort of watered down to an informative, which obviously carries less weight. And I do understand that, but I did have a very lengthy discussion with Ian about this, and, it is on the basis of my advice that I have recommended that we go down the informative rather than the condition route, because I don't think that the requirements of Schedule 17 have been satisfied here, because you can't relate the traffic impacts to the design and the external appearance. But what I would like to say to you by way of reassurance is that High Speed 2 Limited are bound by the environmental minimum requirements. They are a direct clause within the Act, within the High Speed 2 Act. And as Ian said, the Code of Construction Practice is part of those EMRs, if I can call it that. And the Code of Construction Practice does set out very clearly the standards which High Speed 2 Limited need to operate in terms of traffic management on the local roads in the London Borough of Hillingdon. And as I said when I was presenting my training, High Speed 2 Limited are bound by the EMRs, and if they're in breach of them, then we will make a complaint to the Secretary of State. And I can assure you that if we do not have categoric commitments from High Speed 2 Limited that they're going to address our safety concerns before they commence the works which are the subject of this application, then we should be making some very loud noises about that. We're not going to allow them to simply get away with it. And I just wanted to give that assurance to the committee.
Thank you very much. Councillor Duncan? Councillor Yarrow then. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chairman. Just a point of clarification. When we get this traffic management plan, will it be just for this application, or will it be for this application and all the other applications that will be coming through, because they're all linked together and we don't know in what order these are going to be done? In other words, Breakspear Road could indeed be heavy from other HS2 traffic. Will it be linked all together so we know precisely what we're talking about?
Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor. The simple answer to that is yes. The local traffic management plan will come out of the local traffic liaison group, which are required to be set up by HS2 Limited. On that group sits the police, the bus operators, utility services, and obviously the council, HS2, and other interested partners. So the local traffic management plan will be a living document, if I can call it that, and it will also require local specific management for specific applications and for specific proposals. So, for example, in this one, we would expect that a local traffic management plan to have effectively a chapter, section, whatever you want to call it, on this particular submission. We also expect a similar thing to be done on other submissions. Also, as part of the local traffic management plan, it is about coordinating the works appropriately so that HS2 Limited can ensure that they don't clog all our roads all at the same time. Invariably, they will be clogging up roads, and the key is to make sure through that local traffic management plan and through the liaison group that we coordinate it to the best of our residents' ability. So it will be a fairly substantial document at the end, but as I've said before, HS2 isn't really designed that well yet, so we'll only get bits and pieces designed, bits and pieces coming forward at the time, and then we'll have to feed these into the living document, which is the traffic management plan.
Thank you. You want to come back?
Yeah, can I just come back on that? Is it a document that we will be able to see? I know that you said that the traffic's going to be dealt with outside of this committee, but when the traffic plan is produced, do we not have a right to see just where all the blockages are going to be?
Absolutely, Councillor. The traffic management plan will be a public document, and as part of our traffic liaison group, there will be a sub-liaison group which the residents will be on, so they will have input into the traffic management plan as well. The major bit that you're talking about there are the programme of works, which we've yet to see on a large scale, although a programme has just briefly come out, and I did present a slide on it in the training, and that's the extent of the information we know as it stands. We're all sort of learning on our feet on this one, and we're sort of reacting to what HS2 Limited provide us, but rest assured that programme will form a key part of the traffic management plan.
Thank you. Councillor Duncan?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you very much for that clarification to Mr. Alar. I was actually trying to link the design to a condition by saying, logically, we would say this should be the smallest, pond or ponds required. So the design of it, if we think that the design is too big for these ponds, and I'm not saying that we do, which would generate more traffic, then we could perhaps impose a condition such as had originally been considered, and I don't know whether that is still possible. That's all I was saying about that. The other thing I wanted to ask about was hours of operation and what has been laid down about that, because we know that Breakspear Road North is a very congested road. It's narrow. It bears steady traffic loads, and it may be that it's decided, oh, well, we can't do this during the day for traffic reasons, but we will do it at night. So should we be considering hours of operation for this earthworks, which is all we're allowed to consider now, or has that already been taken care of, or do we not have any say over it?
Before I bring the officers in, I'm allowed a bit of general discussion tonight because it's our first one. But our terms of reference and our powers and what we're to consider are quite carefully prescribed by law. And we have a very limited consideration this evening, and that is over the design and appearance of these ponds and whether or not they are detrimental to the public amenity or whether or not the design and appearance is detrimental to road safety. Well, I hear your argument about the size, but I think that may be a stretch too far if it is a cut and fill on the place, and they will still need one digger or a digger regardless how large it may be. And so I wouldn't be too comfortable in going into battle now on testing our lawful use of the schedule over such a tenuous link. So that would be my steer as chair, and I would take the soundings of our experts on that. But I really would like to just focus this down now into the considerations that are before us, which is the design and appearance of this. Does it impact public amenity? Does it impact road safety? Yes or no? If no, then let's move it forward, please. Councillor Lavery.
Taking that steer, and I will stick strictly to the brief on this occasion. There has nothing been suggested either from questions that we've heard thus far, from the officer report, or what is before us, that these ponds do have any of those adverse impacts. In fact, the clarification that the officer provided that it is a cut and fill, i.e. the material isn't coming off site, actually an issue we can't really manage, i.e. the traffic, but actually it has a much lower impact because it's only those vehicles going onto the site originally for construction. We're not taking stuff off. So there is nothing in the report or the addendum that suggests these are going to cause a problem. And I haven't heard anything in the discussion that's gone on for 20 minutes, 25 minutes now, that has challenged that view. And therefore, I'm going to move this forward, if I may, and I'm going to suggest that we accept the officer report as amended by the addendums, in other words, reducing the condition to an informative on the advice of the borough solicitor, and on that basis, I would propose we move forward.
Thank you, Councillor Lavery. Seconded by Councillor Oswald. So show of hands, please, on that one. That is unanimous. Thank you.